Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, OGs, and welcome back to another episode of Grizzly True Crime. My name is Grizzly K, and today we have a very special guest with us. Let me quickly introduce you. We welcome a retired FBI special agent to the show who was the lead FBI profiler on the Golden State Killer case, a former forensic scientist with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, who was also a member of the FBI's evidence response team and is the host of a brand new true crime podcast, which you should check out, The Consult. Welcome to Julia Cowley.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness, I've never seen people so excited. I'm so glad you guys are so excited to be here. Thank you everyone for being here. Remember to hit the like button so that YouTube knows you love this episode and these types of interviews. Okay, so I know you guys have lots of questions. I'll try to get to it. I'll monitor as much as I can. And thank you for also doing the poll. Keep on doing that. I see not everyone knows about this case. But before we get started, I just want to put a trigger warning out, okay? Because discussions today will include information about let's just say a very naughty man. Very violent, very naughty man. Okay, listener discretion is advised. So just for anyone who's triggered by this type of crime, if you don't know about this case, just have a quick read so that you know what we're going to discuss as well. Thank you, and let us all know where you're from in the world as well, as always. So before we begin, let's start the first question. Where were you born and where are you now?
I was born in Annapolis, Maryland at the Naval Academy Hospital, and I currently live in Western Massachusetts in Longmeadow. So I'm about an hour and a half from Boston.
Okay. That's somewhere I've never been. It sounds wonderful, though. I've looked at it, seen some pictures. It looks great. Okay. And when you were younger, did you dream of someday becoming an FBI special agent?
No, not necessarily. I knew from a young age I wanted to be in law enforcement. My mother was reading Helter Skelter about the Manson murders. And I thought, oh, that sounds really interesting. And I asked her if I could read it. And she said, you're not old enough. But when she finished and put it away, I went and got it and I read it. And I decided somehow, some way, I want to be in law enforcement, helping to solve crimes, murders. And that's how I got interested in law enforcement. It really wasn't until I think I was a forensic scientist at the time. And I read Mindhunter by John Douglas. And I decided, I think I want to be an FBI agent.
Right. And as I say, you became the lady Mindhunter, right?
That's right.
In the house.
But my whole life, I always knew, I wouldn't say my whole life, but from the time I read Helter Skelter, I always knew I wanted to do something in law enforcement. I just didn't know what, because I didn't have any family in law enforcement. I didn't know a lot about it. I just knew, okay, I love this stuff. And I want to be a part of it. I want to help solve crimes, figure things out. So it's been a part of my whole life, and it still is. Even though I'm retired, I still love it all.
Wow. So fascinating. You still soak up true crime podcasts and read books and
everything.
You love true crime. Wow.
Everything. I never got tired of it, and I never will. I watch all the shows. I read all the books. I listen to as many podcasts as I can, the really popular ones that I love, and even the ones that maybe aren't as popular, the smaller ones that are covering a case. I love to hear other people's perspectives. I love to hear cases that I've never heard about. I love it. Very interesting.
It's like true passion. I really love that.
It is a true passion.
Absolutely.
It is. And I'm not ashamed of it.
Yeah, you don't always see that, but it's really, really nice to see someone that had true passion, that wanted to do this since you were younger, and that actually went and did it, and you're still loving it now, and have a true crime podcast yourself. I mean, that is amazing. Let me quickly put that on the banner here, truecrimeconsult.com, if you guys want to go and check it out. It's an amazing podcast. We'll get to that a bit later. I was going to say, tell us about it, but hold the phone. Let me get to my questions, guys. Welcome to Lieutenant Peter Pranzo. Welcome to the Pranzos in the house. Thank you for being here as well. And thank you to all the mods, as always. So you have a bachelor's degree in chemistry and a master's degree in forensic science. What was your first job after you graduated, and when did you start working at the FBI?
So my first job after I got done with grad school, I worked at a biotech company for about 11 months. And I was a chemist at the company. But I really wanted to be in a crime lab, and I had been applying to crime labs. And then early one morning, I got a phone call, and it was from the director of the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation Forensics Division. offering me a job. And I had gone out to Tennessee and interviewed, and I'd never been to Tennessee before. And I went out to interview, and took several months. And then I got a phone call out of the blue. And my dad is from Mississippi. So the voice on the phone, at first I thought it was my dad because he had a very thick Southern accent. And I was thinking, why is he calling me this early? You know? So then I went and worked at the crime lab. It was about 11 months after I got done with grad school. And then I worked for Tennessee Bureau of Investigation for about 4 years. And then a colleague of mine, he applied to the FBI and encouraged me to apply as well. And that's when I applied, and I joined the FBI in 1999.
Goodness. Is it a grueling process to get into the FBI? Is it like a lot of stages, or is it sort of apply in one interview?
Yes. Is it a grueling process? I wouldn't say it's grueling. There's some challenges. There's interviews. You have to take a polygraph. You have to do the fitness test. But these are all like little steps. And it took me about a year to go through the process. I put my application in the day before I got married. I went with my cousin was visiting for the wedding, and I said, I have to go turn in my application to the FBI today. I have to do that before we do anything else for the wedding. So I went and turned in my application, and being a newlywed, everything kind of went by really fast that year, but it was like one step after another. I took a written test, and then I had a panel interview with 3 special agents, and they ask you 15 standardized questions. That was terrible. I thought I did awful. I just remember they'd ask me questions. I would draw a blank. And at the time they had these little cassette recorders, and I could see the little wheels turning, and I just stare at them. And I think I'm drawing a blank. But then when I would answer the question, I'd try to act like I meant to take that pause. I tried to be as confident as possible. And then after you pass that stage, I'm probably not getting all the steps in the correct order, but you do a polygraph, and then they start a background investigation on you, and they interview all, friends, families, former professors and former co-workers and everything. It's very thorough. And then once you get through that, there's a polygraph and a drug test. I believe I had to take a drug test. And then after you've cleared all that, they offer you a spot at the FBI Training Academy.
Oh my goodness. Thank you also, Gary, for the super sticker. I appreciate your support. Thank you so much, and welcome to all the members. It's nice to see you all here. So was that panel interview, demographics wise, was it like all men, or was it all men and women?
It was men and women, and there was one African-American female on the panel. I remember her. She was they all had kind of different personalities, and one guy was very, reassuring. Another guy didn't even look at me. And it looked like every time I answered the question, he would be like, oh, okay. Wrong. And then and she was sort of in the middle, but I do remember her specifically because she's female. So.
Okay. That's great. Great to know. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. What else have I got here? So you were then selected to join the FBI's Behavioral and Analysis Unit, as well as the Evidence Response Team. Could you tell us a bit more about what that means?
Sure. So I didn't just go right to the Behavioral Analysis Unit. And I think that's one of the myths. If people don't know the FBI, you have to be an FBI agent first. And typically people who are selected to the Behavioral Analysis Unit have at least 10 years of, work out in the field. So I was assigned to the Boston Division, and I worked public corruption, civil rights for most of that time, for about 11 years. And then I put in as an application process, like most of the jobs in the FBI, and I applied. There was an opening in the Crimes Against Adults Unit at the Behavioral Analysis Unit, which is where I wanted to be. So I applied to that position. It was very competitive. I don't remember how many, but it's a competitive spot because the Behavioral Analysis Unit is not very big, and there's not a ton of agents that are selected. But I was fortunate enough to be selected to go to the unit. So I went to the unit, and worked there. And then I also worked in the evidence response team unit, which is part of the laboratory division, and they are responsible for training and providing resources and processing crime scenes. So
Okay.
I combined my backgrounds. I really, my first love is forensics, and it always
Okay.
has been. But I was also always interested in the behavioral aspects as well. So I was really fortunate in my career to not only be an investigator and work regular FBI cases, but also to become a profiler and to continue with the evidence response team and being able to apply my forensic background to
Yes.
my work as well.
Wow, that's amazing. And when you say the team is not so big, how many people would be on a behavioral analysis team?
So at the time that I was there, and they've expanded, I think there's now 5 units, but when I first started, there were only 3 units. And there was a crimes against adults unit, crimes against children unit, and a terrorism threats unit. And there were 8 special agents in each of those units. So it's very small. So my unit was 8 people, 8
Okay. Wow.
agents.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, very small. But they've since expanded it. So now there's a cyber unit and there's a research unit, I think. And I could be wrong. I'm retired now, so I don't know. They don't tell me anything anymore. So
Okay.
those are also staffed. But as you can see, there's 15,000 agents. So it's a small percentage that are in that unit, and they're covering cases from all over the country to all over the world.
Wow. It's like dream job for me. I would love that. My goodness.
It's a
Do
great job. I loved it.
Right. And so do shows like Mindhunter, in your opinion, portray the FBI's behavioral profiling unit accurately?
Well, Mindhunter was a little different because it was sort of a historical look back, I think, on how the unit got started. I think it's one of the more accurate portrayals. I'm sure there was a little bit of Hollywood added to it. But I thought it was interesting. I thought the interviews of the serial killers I've loved it. I love the show. So I think it was a little more accurate. The other show, Criminal Minds, not as accurate, certainly not as exciting as it is portrayed on TV, but exciting in its own way.
Yes.
But, we didn't do arrests. We're not involved in the investigation. We're really consultants and reviewing the work that's already been done. And
Yes.
it's like an unbiased look to try to give them, helpful information that would help them solve the crime. And a lot of it is just sitting at your desk, reading, reviewing files, and looking at crime scene photos. Sometimes we would go to the crime scenes, but that's long after. Oftentimes, these are very old cases, and the crime scenes don't even look like what they did at the time.
Wow.
But we're really not involved, and it's not as active as it's portrayed on TV. But what I will say is that it was every bit as interesting and fascinating work as it was portrayed on TV. I didn't need all that excitement. The cases themselves were exciting enough.
Wow. Yes. And here they say, what's the age to retire in the FBI in the USA?
In the FBI, you have to have 20 years and be 50 years old. So I retired last May, and I'm 51. I joined the FBI when I was 29, so I had 22 years in.
Amazing. 22 years. I know you're asking because Julia looks very young, right? Very fit and healthy and young. It's like, wait a minute. Retired. No way.
I am retired, yes. And I'm old enough to be retired. So.
Let me put this up in case they have questions. You guys, if you got questions, feel free to ask. I'll get to them when I can. So let's see what else I have here quickly. Okay. How does one become a certified behavioral analyst at the FBI?
So first, like I said, you have to be accepted into the unit, chosen through an application process. And once you're in the unit, there is a training program. And that training program consists of approximately 16 weeks. So like another 16 weeks in addition to what you do at the FBI Training Academy. And this is all classroom work, and it focuses on profiling concepts, psychology. We went for a week to the medical examiner's office and watched autopsies. We have experts that would come in and teach us statement analysis and psychopathy, all these different types of things that we might be faced with when we're profiling. So we have the 16 weeks of classroom. And then from there, when I was there, you had to work and be like the lead profiler on 2 cases in every unit. So I had to do 2 cases in my own unit, and I'm working with a mentor, 2 cases in the terrorism unit with a mentor, and 2 cases in the crimes against children unit with a mentor. And then you have to also participate in a number of consultations. And a consultation is when you sit down with the detectives and go over their case file, discuss things such as the crime scene, looking at the photographs, autopsy results, victimology. You're just going over everything with them. And then once you get through all that, you offer your observations, your assessment, your profile to them. So you have to participate in a number of those. I believe the total was probably like 24, and you have to be in each of the different specialized areas. There are some other training requirements as well, such as teaching certain classes. So it's pretty comprehensive. It takes approximately, depending on how dedicated you are, anywhere from about 1 to 2 years to complete your certification process. And once you've completed everything, you put together kind of a book and you write it up, and then it goes through several reviews through the chain of command up to the director of the critical incident response group, which is the headquarter division that the behavioral analysis unit is a part of. And you're not certified until it gets signed off on by that very last person, the director of the critical incidents response group. So it's a long process, but well worth it.
Yeah.
I used to think to myself when I first became an FBI agent that I don't really need to go be a profiler. I would just like to have all the training that they have. So unfortunately, you have to be a profiler to get the training, but it was, I learned a lot. Not just that I could apply to violent crime cases, but to all types of cases.
Yes. Oh my word. That information must be so amazing. And they say you're a real life Clarice Starling. Right? Goodness. Let's see. When do behavioral analysts become involved in a case, and are investigators obligated to use the information provided?
That's a good question. So we only become involved in a case at the request of the lead agency, the investigative agency. They have to request our assistance, and they are not obligated to use the information that we provide. It's their case. It remains their case. We don't take it away from them, and anything we offer, they can take it or leave it. Sometimes I've had consultations where detectives have disagreed with my assessment and my colleagues' assessments. And I've had other cases where that, it was very helpful to them and they use that information. So it really is, it's their case. It's just another option for them.
Yes.
Another way to, try to solve some of these cases that are more difficult and more challenging.
Okay. For anyone, I just want to say one thing. If anyone feels like you can't watch the whole hour, don't worry. I'm going to recap everything, especially all the information about the Golden State Killer that we're getting to on my highlights channel. So I'm sure the mods have the link for that as well. Otherwise, find it on my About page. Okay. That'll be all summarized if you don't have time. But otherwise, sit here with us, stick with us. We're getting to it. Okay, hold on. So you were the lead profiler on the Golden State Killer case, even though that's not the name that you knew him by. I have so many questions about this, but let me start with this. Could you summarize for those who don't know who the Golden State Killer was, what he did, and how he was eventually captured 32 years after his last known brutal attack?
Sure. So the Golden State Killer, I knew him by a different name, but we'll just call him Golden State Killer to make it easier. But he began his crime spree, at least at the time that we knew of, in Sacramento in 1976. And it was a series of sexual assaults. And these sexual assaults were very frequent, and they covered a specific area of Sacramento called the East Area, which is how he got his first name. And what he would do is he would break into homes at night. He would wake up the victims while they were sleeping. He would shine a flashlight in their eyes. He would threaten them. He would threaten them with weapons. He often would put a gun to their heads, a knife to them, and he would tie them up. Then he would proceed to ransack their homes, and then he would sexually assault them. He'd spend several hours in their homes, and if they were sexually assaulted multiple times, he would ransack the homes in between. He was very unique in that after several attacks on female victims only, he began attacking male and female victims. And again, very similar MO. He would go in the middle of the night, wake them up while they were sleeping, shining a flashlight on them. He would have the female victim bind the male victim, and then he would bind the female, then he would rebind the male. He'd ransack their homes. In between the ransacking, he'd come back and threaten them. He'd often remove the female victim. He'd tell them, I want you to come with me, help me find the money, help me find your purse. And then he would take them to another room where he would sexually assault them. So this was going on in 1976 through 1979. During that time, he did, shoot and kill a couple. He was suspected of having killed Brian and Katie Maggiore. They were a couple that were walking their dog in Sacramento, and they were found shot to death in the backyard of a house. And investigators believed that Brian, the male victim, likely confronted him when he saw him peeping into windows. And they believed it was connected because they found shoelaces in the backyard of the house near the victims' bodies. And he often used shoelaces to bind the victims. And this was also in the area of all the other assaults were occurring. Then he gravitated south a bit to the Bay Area of California and continued very similar MO. And then he went down to Southern California, where he committed 12 homicides, male, female victims, all very similar. In 2001, they were finally connected through DNA. So the homicides in the Southern California area were connected to the attacks up in the Sacramento area. Into the Northern California area. And then the other attacks were linked, for the most part, by his MO, his behavior being so similar in all of the different crimes. So that's kind of a summary. One of the things that I also looked at was a series of ransackings that occurred in Visalia, California from 1974 to 1976. So these are just prior to the attacks occurring in Sacramento. And many detectives believed that the Visalia ransacker, as this burglar became known, was also the same individual responsible for the attacks in Sacramento. However, I came to find out this was not a consensus. There were other detectives that did not believe that they were connected at all. A lot of it had to do, I think, with the composite. They were completely different. And I think it was also hard for some people to understand that he could go from being a burglar to the attacks he committed in Sacramento. So that escalation seemed very severe. So one of the things I wanted to answer, and I thought it was really important to answer this question, is whether or not the Visalia ransacker was also the Golden State Killer. That was really important, and was made even more important by the fact that during the Visalia ransackings, that offender attempted to kidnap a young woman, 16-year-old, out of her house. And when her father confronted him, he shot and killed him. And that victim was named Claude Snelling. So he was a ransacker who's also a murderer in that case as well. So I thought it was important to try to see if these are connected, to see if it's the same offender as well.
Yes.
So,
oh my goodness.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, must have
That's
been something.
very brief summary of, a case that spanned from, around 1974 up through 1986. 1986 is his last known homicide.
Goodness. And when did you start working on the case with analyzing?
I got involved in 2011.
Okay.
So this was a long time after the last murder. And the case came in, again, it was at the request of the Sacramento County Sheriff's Office, along with the Sacramento Division of the FBI, and they were requesting assistance from the Behavioral Analysis Unit. They were looking for an unknown offender profile. They were looking for linkage analysis. They were looking for investigative suggestions for the case. I think they felt this might be their last chance to try to catch him, particularly if he was still alive, and statistically he should have been still alive. So then in 2018 he was caught, and it was through forensic genetic genealogy.
Yes.
And we now know he is Joseph James DeAngelo.
My goodness, I remember when they finally put a face to the name.
Yeah.
The many names, right?
Yes.
Someone asked earlier, what did you call him? Because you didn't know him as the Golden State Killer. That is based on a book
I
that
called
made it popular.
him, so he was known in Sacramento. He was known as the East Area Rapist. When he migrated down to Southern California, he became the original Night Stalker, not to be confused with Richard Ramirez, who was the Night Stalker. So he was called the original Night Stalker. So I knew him as the ear. I called him either the ear or ear-ons. And that's what most of the detectives called him. And then true crime author Michelle McNamara, she wrote an article in LA Magazine, and she dubbed him the Golden State Killer. And then she wrote a book on the case called All Be Gone in the Dark, and dubbed him the Golden State Killer. And that's the name that he became known by.
Yes, that's how we all know him, right? Everyone's like, Golden State Killer, exactly. And here's a good question. When a killer is profiled, does the FBI still follow this grouping? 1, known facts, 2, fiction, and 3, theory.
I'm not aware of that grouping. I certainly have. What I will say is I think everyone has their own process. And, my process, certainly I've got to go over exactly what are the facts. And I like that you put in there the fiction, because there were a lot of things I had to clarify. Is this true? Did he do this? Because one of the things that was widely reported is that he sent letters to the police department and wrote poems, and these poems were attributed to him. So I wanted to know, did he write these? Do you really believe? And one of the detectives told me, no, he did not write those letters. We actually know who wrote those letters, and it was someone completely different, unrelated. And so that helped me quite a bit, because that's a very different offender that's going to be communicating with the police. And I didn't think he was the type of offender that would necessarily communicate with the police. So that was good to clear up that fact from, fiction. So, but my process, and like I said, everybody has their own process. Every profiler, when they get a case, they look at it differently. We all have different backgrounds. and abilities that we apply. But I always like to look at the crime scene photos and the autopsies first. I really like to try to piece back together what I think happened at the scene first, because that's my area of expertise. And I also, just try to look at, okay, what's in the reports from the crime scene specialists that process the scene? What do the photographs tell me? What is the autopsy telling me regarding the cause of death? Are there any defense wounds? That tells you about the interaction between the offender and the victim. And that's really important. So I like to, at least as best I can, piece back together the sequence of events. And then I look at victimology, going through the complete background of the crime victim. Were they high risk? Were they low risk? Were they targeted? Were they a victim of opportunity? These are the types of questions I try to answer, and then try to piece together what I believe happened. And then from there, try to determine, okay, what does this tell us about the offender's personality traits and characteristics? What type of person are we looking for? That's my process. And easier explained than done, because sometimes when you're looking at 15,000 pages of documents, it's very overwhelming. And I would go back through things over and over and over again. Like, for example, when I was going through all of the incident reports regarding the attacks in Sacramento, I got about a quarter of the way through. I'm like, wait a second. He doesn't commit sexual assault first, ever. He ransacks first, every single time. So I read all the cases from that point on with that in mind, looking for, is there any time he deviates from that? And there were a couple of cases where he deviated from that, where he didn't do the ransacking. And when he didn't complete the ransacking, there was no sexual assault. So then I started back over just to double check my theory. And I went back through it all over again, making sure I have to get this right, because this is really important. This may be the entire reason he's doing this. These ransackings are key to him. This is really important, which was also kind of a piece that helped me start to link the Visalia ransackings to these cases as well.
Yes.
So, yes.
Oh,
and
goodness.
When I say me, I also had, there were two people that worked on this with me. One was a crime analyst named Alice Casey, and she went through everything with me, and she created timelines and link charts, and it was an amazing amount of work she put into it. And then I had a partner on the case, Bob Drew, who also, I would go to him like almost daily and say, well, what do you think about this? Let's go over this case and let's go over that. And then before giving our final analysis, we sat down with almost the entire unit. Not everybody was able to participate, but we sat down with them and we went over everything again. So it's a group process. However, there's always one lead. And if you have a disagreement, then you have to defer to the lead. So if somebody disagreed with me, I'm the one in charge. It comes down to who's ever the lead agent, and they are the ones that are the final word on the opinion and the assessment that's offered.
All right. Well, that must have been nice to be the lead. Right on that.
It's nice sometimes, but it's also, there's a lot of pressure as well. Yeah.
Yes.
You need to take responsibility for if you make a mistake, and for the quality of the work, that's on you. Yes. So there is a lot of pressure. Sometimes it's nice to just go participate in someone else's consult and offer, this is what I think, and then you can walk out of the room and I'm done. I gave my thoughts. They'll take it or leave it. So that's always, and then you're not the one that has to write up the report. You're not the one that has to go give the briefing to all of the detectives. So it is kind of nice to sometimes not be the lead.
Yes.
Not as much responsibility.
Right. Shelby, you're saying what I'm thinking. I'm totally dorking out on this right now. I love that. I'm totally dorking out on this. Me too. Right? It's just like, wow. So, wait, this question. Oh, man, I've just lost my place here. Hold on one second, please. Okay, wait, because you were profiling him. I just want to find this 1 second.
Mhm.
Also, wait. Hate it when I lose my place. There we go. How close a match was the profile that you and your team had created on the Golden State Killer? Did it surprise you that he was a former police officer or no?
No, it didn't surprise me. In fact, so the profile was very close, and I will tell you where I think I was off, and I'll explain why, because there's always a reason why, right? So, but I was not, that's a very good question about being a police officer. So I actually had it in my original report that I thought he had law enforcement training because of the use of the flashlight to blind people, because that's a tactic. That's a law enforcement tactic. When you want to gain advantage, you blind someone with your flashlight. And his use of the guns, he was very efficient. Anytime he had resistance from a male victim, he shot them immediately. He was accurate. He didn't hesitate. And I just thought that that required some sort of formalized training. I was pretty certain about that. Now, I will say not everyone agreed with me on the case, but my partner, who knew more about it than anyone else on the unit besides me, we thought there has to be some sort of formal training. But the supervisor at the time thought that it was too strongly worded for me to say law enforcement training. But it really didn't matter. So I took that out. I took that part out. But no, I wasn't surprised. In fact, I was kind of like, I knew it. I knew it. So the rest of it is sort of intangibles. But a lot of people were surprised when he came into court and he appeared to be a feeble, confused old man. Wasn't what we expected. Yes. Based on media reports of him. We would expect him to be bigger, tougher. So a lot of people, it was unexpected. For me, it wasn't unexpected. It's what I thought he would be. I found him to be very insecure in the way he committed his crimes, and I thought he would appear to others as being a very insecure individual, fearful, particularly fearful of other men. His victim selection by choosing men, that was very purposeful. They were not obstacles. They were chosen for a reason. Mm-hmm. And I believed that they were chosen because he wanted to assert his dominance over them and try to compensate or overcompensate for his, insecurity. Mm-hmm. Very much so. So his appearance in court wasn't surprising to me. I also thought there were a lot of indications throughout these crimes that he, might appear strange to others, difficult, awkward, based on the fact that whenever he would get highly stressed, like somebody would follow him or he'd almost get caught, there was a lot of mumbling and talking to himself. So I thought that would be a characteristic that he displayed in real life when he, his non-criminal life, I should say, not his real life, but his non-criminal life, that would be something people noticed about him, that when he became stressed, he might start mumbling, talking to himself. And that actually turned out to be true. Neighbors and others have discussed how he would get mad and he'd be in his backyard pacing and mumbling and talking to himself. And they thought he was strange and they referred to him as Crazy Joe. And so that was in my analysis, that he would be considered odd by people.
It must be so nice when you think, he must have law enforcement training, and then people disagree with you. And then it turns out they did. And you're like, yep, totally.
I try to be the bigger person, but there's, see, I was right.
Yeah, right.
No. I mean, there always is a sense of, you do want to be right. And if you're not right, you need to understand why you're not. So it's really important to understand. So I'll go into where I thought I missed. So one of the things that a lot of investigators believed is that during the time of the crimes, he was in the military. And a lot of it had to do with because of how tactical he was. And he was very tactical, but we've already talked about how he was a police officer. But that the reason why his crimes were spanning the entire state of California was because he was moving from military base to military base. And one of the questions I wanted to answer was he in the military or not? The other thing that he did at some of the scenes, he would boast about being in the military to the victims. He would tell them he was in the military. He would brag about having multiple sexual conquests while he was in the military. He told one victim he saw her at the club, the military base club. So he made a lot of comments during his crimes that he wanted these victims to believe he was in the military, and he was in the military at the time of these crimes. So two things. I didn't think he was in the military at the time of the crimes because I didn't think that he would be providing details of his life that could potentially lead to his identification. Mm-hmm. And he was so good at disguising himself. He wore a mask. He blindfolded his victims. He would blind them with the flashlight. He disguised his voice. So he did everything he could not to be identified and to hide his identity. I didn't think he would be offering personal information that could be potentially be truthful. I didn't believe it. So that was one of the reasons I didn't believe he was in the military at the time during the crimes. The other thing, though, is that I wasn't sure he'd been in the military at all. I thought he was going to be younger because when, like I said, I believed that the Visalia ransackings were connected. And so I thought he would have started that crime spree a lot earlier in life. But when he started the ransackings in Visalia, he was 28 years old and he was already working as a police officer. So he turned out to be a lot older than what I thought. And I should have known he was younger. There's a lot of very, or that he was older. But one of the things that kept, I guess, I don't want to say confusing me, but I kept going back to is that there was such an immaturity to his crimes that I thought he was going to be younger. And what I think that I missed on is that we have to remember maturity isn't about chronological age. It's about your emotional maturity. Yes. And so I put emotional maturity and equated it to a chronological age. And one of the things I'll say is I never put an age on him because we kind of got away from that because of this very reason. So there's, I didn't say it was, a white male between, 25 and 35. It was just that really, didn't factor into the profile at all, and nor was it necessary. But I just thought he was going to be younger than he was. And so that's where I think I missed. But now knowing what I know, I understand why I missed that. Mm-hmm. And hopefully I never made that mistake again. So, but so that's where I think it was a little bit off. But he, during the time of the crimes, when he was committing the crimes, he was not in the military, but he did have prior military experience. He was in the military for a couple of years after he graduated in high school. And I think I want to say he joined the military like in 1964 or something. He was in the Navy. So he had actually been in the military, and that surprised me because I thought he would have been too young.
Goodness. All these ones like Dahmer also in the military. Oh my word. Mm-hmm. And here someone was asking, or JC actually asked, you're telling that there were 8,000 suspects. Was he among those 8,000?
He was not. Oh. They had a list of and it was all the different agencies that had kind of put a combined list of all the different suspects that they had come across or names that they had been given or just anyone that they had talked to. And that list was literally between 7,000 and 8,000 suspects. He was not on the list. No.
Wow. That is so scary to think about. Yeah, he was a micromelon too. That's what we call them, with the tiny little the insecurity.
Yes, that was a very prevalent characteristic described by the victims.
Hmm.
And while it's not helpful in necessarily identifying him, that gives us insight into issues he may have emotionally,
Yes.
certainly. Yeah.
Goodness, lacking maturity and melon. Right. I'm sorry if I don't get to your question, by the way, guys. I'm seeing so many good questions, but sometimes, my goodness, let's see what's here. They weren't going to find this killer without DNA. Okay, okay. But I mean, at the end, the profile was pretty spot on, huh? Has he been
Well,
diagnosed with a mental illness? Sorry,
not that
carry
I'm
on.
aware of. Oh, I was going to say that's a good point. In, and I like to always say this: profiling does not solve murders. It does not. It's the investigative work that's done by the detectives. It's science. That's what solves these cases.
Yes.
This is just a resource that's available. But being a former forensic scientist myself, I knew DNA. They had his DNA. I knew it was going to get solved someday. I knew it was going to catch up to him. And I believe all the detectives believe that as well. I think we just had hoped that they would catch him before he died.
Yes, and thank goodness they did. Sort of, I mean, he was so frail when they caught him, such a confused old man.
And he wasn't frail.
Right.
he was doing he was doing calisthenics in his jail cell, and
Oh my goodness.
but when he's confronted and when he loses control, he completely implodes. And that's not a
Wow.
technical word, but he can't handle that. And we saw that. We saw that in his crimes. So when he is confronted and caught and arrested and being interrogated by detectives, what is he going to do? He's going to revert back to his true self. And what you saw in court is probably the truest version of Joe DeAngelo that there is. That's who
Wow.
he is.
Were you there in court, or did you ever get to meet him sort of face to face, or
I did not. Kind of a myth as well. We don't
right?
participate in the interviews or like I said, in the investigation. I did not go to court. I watched it. I did watch the proceedings, and I did talk to detectives during the post-arrest process. I was hearing about it, but I wasn't there. We really keep our distance from that. We're not
Right.
in the mix, so to speak. We have to kind of be a step back from that so that we
Yeah.
can be as unbiased as possible.
Okay.
Mhm.
Someone says here, thank you for pointing that out. Someone's saying that my Nightbot link isn't correct, but there it is, truecrimeconsult.com, if you want to go and find Julia's podcast. And then a very important question you raised earlier when we were chatting was that the media tends to create a reputation or a profile of a killer. In your experience, does the media coverage and speculation help or hinder the work of the FBI and behavioral analysts?
I don't think it helps or hurts in one way or another. I think media coverage can be very beneficial to bring a case to light, to get more information, to get leads, to make people aware that may not be aware of a case. I think it's very beneficial. Where I think my work came into play is that I can't rely on media reports to create a profile, because there's so many details. And this is, and I'm not saying the media is wrong. Sometimes the reporting is inaccurate, but where I think the issue is that they don't have the details that would be in an interview report of a victim, or a crime lab report describing, or an autopsy report. They may not have all those details, and those details are very important for creating like a profile. So, I mean, I followed the Golden State Killer case in the media. I went to websites. I read all the books. I saw documentaries on it. So I knew a lot that had been reported, but had I tried to create a profile from the media reports, I would have been very wrong, because there were just little details. For instance, there's nowhere in the media to point out that all the ransakings occurred prior to any of the assaults. And that was so key. So the media doesn't report, okay, first he does this, then he does this, then he does this. He doesn't. And a lot of it is to save time and space. The media may not even realize that that's an important detail, and they don't report it that way. And some of it is to protect the victims. So I just had a lot more access to all the details that are necessary to create a profile. So I don't want to slam the media, because I do think the work that they do is extremely important. We often utilize the media in investigations to try to generate more leads, or to try to put information out there to get an offender to act or react a certain way. Media can be very helpful in that regard. So as far as I am concerned, the media has never hurt the work that I do. I just couldn't ever rely on media reports to create a profile. That would just be irresponsible.
Right. Let the media profile this guy. You guys are asking for the link as well. I'm going to put it in the chat there. Thank you so much, Shelby. Loving this. One of my favorite interviews. Oh my word, that's so sweet. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Goodness.
Very nice.
She's a pro. Thank you, Tyler. Welcome. Tyler, how does Grizzly always get the best kiss? We got connections, people. Jerry Williams was on the show. Huh? We got connections.
Yes, Jerry recommended me. So
yes.
That was nice of her.
Yes, and I'm so glad. Okay, I hope I didn't miss any of your questions there in between. Speaking of the media, DeAngelo was known as the original Night Stalker, the Diamond Knot Killer, and other names. So a question that I've had, because I've written some true crime books, and it always bothers me why these killers get these cool names, right? So does the FBI actually use these names, or is it just pure media?
That's a good question. Generally, the names are made up by the media, but if we're talking about a case, we use the names as well. Like I said, I always referred to him as Earons, and that was the title of my case. We called it the Earons.
What for anyone who doesn't know, what does Earons mean?
Earons was a combination of the East Area Rapist, original Night Stalker.
Earons, there we go, guys. Well, that at least doesn't sound as cool as like the original Night Stalker. I'm always like, Goat Boy. That's what I call the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez. I'm like, Goat Boy.
Yes.
Or Ted Bundy is like, to me, Nose Picker, or Soxy, because he had all the sock collection and stuff. I don't know if it helps to give them such notoriety, because then others aspire to be like them.
I agree. And that's why I think, in particular, like the podcast I'm doing now is kind of exposing who these people really are.
Mm-hmm.
And when you expose who they really are, maybe he sounds glamorous because he's the Golden State Killer, but let's take a look at who this person really is. Mm-hmm. There's nothing cool about him. There's nothing glamorous. There's nothing intriguing. He's just exposed for what he really is, which was a very insecure, ineffective, pathetic, odd individual. Maybe he had people in his life that saw him differently, but that's not who he was. Who he was is the person that committed those crimes. That's the real him.
Mm-hmm. A micro boomer.
Yeah. So I like to expose who these people are. It's nothing good about them. It's nothing mysterious, really. They're just very bad, insecure people. Yeah.
Depraved and pathetic and cowardly. Right. So did you read Michelle McNamara's book, and what did you think about it?
I did read it. I couldn't wait to read it. I really enjoyed it. I think she is a phenomenal writer. I was anticipating that book coming out, so I was very sorry that she passed away before she could finish it. The only thing that I would say is, as I read through it, I thought that, and it's hard for me to say because I knew the case so well, I wondered if you didn't know the chronology of everything, if you could follow the book as well, if you didn't actually know the case as well as I did. I don't know, because I knew the case so well, but she was a phenomenal author, and she wrote articles for LA Magazine, which I read when they first came out as well. And I loved her reporting on the case.
Yes. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so sad. They say so sad she died before they caught him, right? Yes.
Yes.
And did you ever speak to his 3 children?
No,
Interesting.
I did not. I do believe that investigators have talked with the family, and I'd
Okay.
like to protect them and their privacy as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this question's come up a few times now about how DNA was used to solve the case.
It was submitted to one of the genealogy sites, and they matched it to a 4th cousin. And from that point, it was just good old forensic genealogy investigation, and they matched it back to 2 different people. And one of them was living in Sacramento, and that was Joe DeAngelo. And he was living in one of the very neighborhoods that he had terrorized so many years earlier, and in a house very similar to the style of homes that he always broke into, which were those single family 1-story ranch style homes.
Mm-hmm.
He had a particular type of home he liked to burglarize.
Oh my goodness. And did you ever meet Michelle McNamara?
No, I did not meet her.
Okay. And
I would have
then-
loved to have met her.
Right? That would have been amazing. Goodness. I'm going to have to read up on this. I'm going to have to read up on this. I'm sure there's lots we could deep dive on this case. It's so interesting. Do you have a little bit more time than an hour? We got
Yes, that's fine.
we
Just
got
gonna have a little
overtime
bit of
every
water
time,
there.
guys. Overtime every time. I did launch some new merch for you guys. You've been asking for it for overtime every time. It is now available on the merch store if you want to check, and we're going to do it a little bit tonight. Going overtime again. Just a little bit. We won't go too long, maybe 10 minutes or so over. Did he stalk some victims? That's interesting. Did he stalk some victims? What a monster.
That's a good question as well. There's no evidence that I could see that he pre-selected a victim and followed them. He may have. Where their risk came was just living in the homes, in the neighborhoods where he was comfortable. So there's a story that's been reported and passed on, but I was never able to verify it, that there was a town meeting. And in that town meeting, one of the husbands stood up and said something to the effect that I would never let this happen to my wife, or men shouldn't let this happen to their wife, something along those lines. I don't know exactly what he purportedly said. But then, according to the story, that couple became his next victims. So based on that story, which was reported in the media, that was the only case that potentially he pre-selected a victim and followed them that we knew of. So when I was researching it and meeting with detectives and going through all of the files, I kept asking for, reports, like interviews of these victims. And I had all the interviews of these victims, but I couldn't find anywhere that had been reported that this actually happened. But the detectives who were on the case at the time said it happened, but I never had proof of that. So I didn't consider it. It could have happened. It wasn't one of those questions where I thought, if I don't answer this question, it changes the whole profile. It wasn't one of those things, but I never verified. And it's really important for me to verify the information through some sort of document or interview or contact with a detective that directly interviewed the victims. And I was just never able to do that. But other than that, I'm not aware if he stalked his victims. I've read reports that he stalked, an ex-girlfriend and stalked her family after they broke up. I've heard that, but stalking people is what he did. He stalked neighborhoods. So if he stalked individuals, wouldn't surprise me at all.
Mm-hmm. My goodness. They say that is frightening. That is quite frightening. My goodness.
It is.
Okay, let's see what we've got here. So when did you retire and what have you been up to since?
I retired at the end of May of this year, and I work at the University of Massachusetts in their equal opportunity office. And then I'm also working on my podcast, which is my part-time job. I do it at nights and on weekends. And I do it just out of the love of the work. I do the podcast with 3 of my former colleagues, and we are basically just talking about cases that we worked on the way we would talk about the cases if we were sitting in the behavioral analysis unit going over cases. And that's the concept of the consult. And it was a way for us to kind of continue to work together doing the work that we love.
Yeah, I love it. And there's part 1, 2, and 3 of the Golden State Killer that you've done as well. So if you really want like a deep dive from people who worked on the case, then go and check that out. I put the link in a few times as well. Thank you, Mods, for putting it to truecrimeconsult.com. That is it. So go and check Out of the Love of Work. Out of the Love of the Work. Great phrase. Okay. Exactly.
Yes.
Total passion
I
for
love
the
it. As weird as that sounds, but I love it. It's fascinating work. It's important work. And there's nothing else that I think I'm capable of doing. Not qualified to do anything else. So.
Well, we love your podcast. You're doing that so well. I mean, there's a lot of hard work that goes into podcasting. It's not just like click, let's go.
It's not. It's really hard. So even just, getting an episode together. So we're a little slower. I joke around. It's a little rinky dink. We're doing everything ourselves. And that's the way I like it, though. It's just doing it ourselves and putting out a product that I think only the geekiest of true crime geeks are going to like, but it's there for them.
I think we're all geeks over here. Grizzlies are geeks. We should make merch. Grizzly geeks.
Yeah. And not only like the older listeners, but I also think one of the things that was always really important to me was to mentor young people, because I didn't have any mentors. Like when I knew I wanted to go into forensics, it really wasn't popular like it is now. So I didn't have anyone to talk to. So I always made it a point throughout my career to always make myself available to young people, to students that were interested, to tell them the process of how to, to reach their career goals. And so this is also for them, the students that are out there that are really interested in criminal justice and profiling and forensics. So I hope younger people will also enjoy it.
Yes. I'm sure they would say we are Grizzly geeks. So we've got a whole Grizzly community here who will love your podcast. I'll also put it on that other channel, guys, so you can see it here, there. Make sure you go to truecrimeconsult.com. The link is also in the description box for anyone's asking, where is it? I've shared it a few times and it's there. Now, I know that you were just watching, so don't feel pressured to answer this question. But if you could profile Brian Laundrie, Melon Boy, is there any information you could offer? Is what the media is portraying, is it accurate at all?
I don't know. I hate to answer that. I didn't work on the case. I was retired by that time. And of course I was in Massachusetts, and that case didn't really come up to this area as far as I know. So I didn't even have an opportunity to work on it. It's very, like I said, it's very difficult to profile a case or to profile a person without knowing the specific details of the case. I just wouldn't even be able to do it. And I'll sit and watch like a Dateline with my husband, and he'll say, "What do you think?" And I'll say, "I don't know." And he goes, "What good are you?" So, and it takes a long time. I don't just come up with an observation or opinion right away. I really have to study things and go back over things and try to get all the details possible. Certainly I have an opinion on the case. It's probably in line with what most of your viewers are thinking. I think the same things.
Yes.
But to offer a professional opinion, I just don't have the information to do that. And I do worry too that even though I'm retired, I still represent the FBI, and I wouldn't want anyone to think I was speaking for the FBI.
Yes. Okay, no, we're not pressuring you to do that. It would just be so interesting from someone who profiled so much. Like, to me, the summary might just be that really it's a DV case, and it unfortunately was in the spotlight because of their social media activity and being on the Moab body cam footage and
So I will plug another podcast because it is one of my favorite podcasts, but Real Crime Profile. They do an excellent job on the body cam video. They analyze it. I think it was excellent. So if they want to hear some really good analysis, I couldn't do anything any better than they did, but I loved that episode. And for those, again, that are interested in criminal profiling, real crime profile, Jim Clemente was retired by the time I got to the unit, but I spoke to him on the phone once. That's all I can say. I had a case against the Archdiocese of Boston for child abuse. This is many years ago. And Jim and I discussed it when he was down in the unit. So I talked to him on the phone. And then after he retired, he stopped by the unit once and I met him. I'm sure he has no memory, but all of his post-bureau work, I've really admired it. And I think he is an excellent profiler. And he works with a behavioral analyst that used to work with New Scotland Yard, and they do that podcast, and I love it. It's one of my favorites. But if for anyone interested in the Gabby Petito case, they've covered it, and it's well done.
Okay, awesome. I put the link in. I think it's realcrimeprofile.com, right? I just saw also Jim Clement was mentioned there, so it must be it.
Yes. Jim Clemente and Laura Richards do it. And she's an expert on domestic violence. And she's world renowned, and it's very well done. And I will also say that of all the podcasts as well, one of my favorite episodes, and I want listeners to go listen to this, is their analysis of the interview done with Prince Andrew.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah.
They analyzed the BBC interview that was done with him, and that's a great episode. A couple good episodes as well.
Okay, I'm writing it down as well, so I don't forget realcrimeprofile.com.
But listen to the consult first, and then go.
Yes. Everyone first, the consult. Leave your review on Apple Podcasts. That would
Here
be
I
great.
am sending everyone to other podcasts, but I really am a fan. I'm a fan of lots of podcasts, true crime podcasts. I listen to other podcasts on the way to work and on the way home, and I'm learning a lot from other podcasters as well.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, I'm laughing at this question. Does the FBI only employ American citizens? Asking for Grizzly. Thank you for that.
Yes, you have to be an American citizen.
And under 37, and I'm 37, guys. I'm almost turning 38. I'm sorry.
There are other positions. There are other positions. That's just for special agent. You can be over 37 for other positions. We have many support positions in the FBI. Linguists, and I know I'm going to leave some out. We have intelligence analysts, we have operations specialists, we have mechanics, we have writers, we have, like I said, I can't think of everybody. We have electronics technicians, we have computer specialists. So most of the Bureau are not agents.
But they got to be American. I'm South African, living in the Netherlands, guys. So even if I were to get a green card and move there, I still can't, right? You have to be an American citizen.
You do.
For me, I'd be like, if I moved there now, guys, I'd be like 47 by the time I get that.
But there are plenty of other jobs. You don't have to be a special agent.
Exactly, right?
So
exactly.
There are other jobs in the FBI that, keep the Bureau going.
Yeah, I just
not all just
become American. To become American takes like 10 years, I think. To become American, if I were to move there now, I think it'll take like 10 years, and only then. But you never know, guys. I will let you know if I'm ever accepted. Okay, they say do it, G. Yeah, then we can send you gifts for that. Never exactly. Thank you so much. Let's see what else I got here. So I remember here you're doing something interesting now. You're a professor at the Bay Path University, right, in Massachusetts.
Yes. So I also teach a class, just one class a semester at Bay Path University, which is a small all-women's college. And it's just right down the street from where I live. And I've been teaching a class there even before I retired. I've been teaching there. I taught criminal evidence and victimology and criminal investigative classes to their legal studies department.
There we go. Okay. I've got a picture here. I forgot to show it. Hold on. Here we go. Transform it. Let's just make it bigger.
Oh, no.
There you are. Yeah, isn't it? Aren't you teaching there?
So that was a presentation I gave to police officers. It was a sergeant's conference. I
Uh-huh.
believe that was on civil rights matters, if I'm right.
Okay.
Yep,
Like
that
that?
was the civil rights presentation. So before I did profiling, I worked public corruption and civil rights. So I didn't actually always work violent crime. I was obviously a forensic scientist. I processed a lot of homicide scenes, but as an investigator in the bureau, I was considered more of a white collar agent working
Mm-hmm.
public corruption, civil rights, and some financial crimes as well. So one of the things I was always concerned about is because when I originally got assigned to the office, I thought, well, I'll never be able to become a profiler if I'm working white collar cases and I'm not working violent crime. And so I talked to somebody, I don't remember who it was, but it was somebody that was in the unit. And they said, it doesn't really matter the kind of work that you're doing in the bureau, as long as you're a good investigator. That's the main requirement to become a profiler. So I stayed because I love the work. I really loved public corruption and civil rights. And there's a lot of similarities to corrupt officials and high-level white-collar offenders as there are to some serial killers, believe it or not. Similar personality traits and characteristics.
Yes.
So I loved that work. I didn't think I would. And that's the beauty of the bureau is that, you can make the most of anything. And I learned so much, and I became a very good investigator doing that work. And that did, apply well to the BAU, and I was still able to go there even though I didn't work the violent crime. So in that picture, I was teaching police officers about civil rights.
Okay, great picture. I hope you don't mind me sharing that. I was like, ooh,
It's fine.
bunch of pictures. Make a slide. Everyone knows I love to make slides over here. I wanted to ask, talking about personality traits earlier, Lieutenant Peter Pranzo says, I'm a type A, right? And he's a type A. Are you also a type A?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure that
He
I
knew it. He knew it. He's like, I'm sensing Julia's one of us.
Mhm.
Right? Type
Yes.
A's unite, everyone.
Yes,
Absolutely.
I'm very much a type A. I try to be very organized. If I get disorganized, I get a little anxious. I like things clean. Yeah, just typical type A.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Same here. This is actually a good question. We won't ask too many more. We're going very much over time every time. But any theories as to why the Golden State Killer attack stopped in the 80s? That's
I
interesting.
do have some theories, but I don't know if they're right, and I don't think we'll know if they're right until we ask him. But
No.
first of all, I see that, told you. He's right. So first of all, I think he was getting older and he was starting to have children. I think he got busy with life. It gets hard what he was doing. He's out a lot. He's prowling all the time. He's being chased. He's having to get away. And as you get older, that gets harder. So I think it was a combination of that. I also think, and if we think back to those days, those of us that remember, some of the listeners might be too young, but that's when DNA really started to be used to solve homicide cases. And he's not a stupid man. I'm sure he kept up with that. So his last homicide is in 1986. And if we look back at some of the big cases, and one in particular that was written about in The Blooding by Joseph Wambaugh, DNA was being used to solve homicide cases. And that may have been a factor as well. And had he continued, would he have tried to prevent leaving DNA at scenes? Possibly. But I think it was a combination of things. But without asking him, I don't know for sure. But those are my theories.
Okay. Sorry, I was just typing there as well while you're answering. Typing, guys, hashtag question to enter a draw to ask the final question tonight. Okay, so type in hashtag question in the comments now, and then I'll do a draw once you've entered, and you get to ask the final question. Make sure it's a good one. This was a good one from earlier. Was he diagnosed with a mental illness?
Not that I know of. I'm not sure that he's even been tested.
Oh my goodness. And would you put him on the spectrum of, is he like a sociopath, a psychopath, or none of those?
Well, one of the things about profiling, we don't diagnose people, and I'm not qualified to diagnose people. What I will tell you is his characteristics are lacking empathy and self-centered, self-absorbed, doesn't care about others, likely doesn't have a conscience. So, he was too prepared and organized and capable of making decisions quickly, in my opinion, to suffer from any significant mental impairment. That would be my best judgment. But in terms of trying to diagnose him, I really don't know. I would think that had he ever been given the psychopathy checklist, I hope he's higher than me.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah, but I don't know. I really
Okay.
don't think people that can do those types of things to other people have a conscience. They really don't.
No regard for others, no conscience, right?
No regard.
So do it like this, guys, like Lieutenant Peter Pronto, #question. That's all you got to type in, hashtag and question. I'm going to do a lucky draw like I do with the postcard giveaways. And then once I draw, then you'll see if you won. And then once you win, you got to ask your question, okay? They say, seems like narcissistic personality with sociopathic tendencies. Okay. I mean, it could speculatively seem like that. Yes.
Potentially, yes.
Potentially, yes. And why would someone have a lack of empathy? That's interesting.
I don't know that we know the answer to that. I personally, this is just based on classes I've taken, but I'm not an expert. I think we're born a certain way, but I also think that a significant portion of our development, our minds are still kind of like putty, and certain things that happen to us and impact us will make us go one direction or another. So I think it's a combination of nature and nurture. I don't think we have just one answer. Okay, you're born like that, or you're made like that through your environment. I think it's a combination. I think that our brains, especially as we're developing, are capable of being changed and change as we get older.
Okay, that makes sense. Here we're drawing for the question, guys. So let's see who wins this one. Very exciting stuff. Okay, Jason, it's you. You're up. Ask your question. It's very celebratory over here. So now we'll wait for Jason's question. He acted so feeble in court. What a disgrace. Very odd human. Very odd human indeed. My goodness.
I agree.
That's so scary to think that he was all like, bewildered, and yet he's doing training in his cell. That's so scary. Goodness.
It's because his control was taken away from him. He cannot handle that.
Goodness. Let's hope he's not a type A. He's not one of us. Yeah. Okay. So we're waiting for your question. Jason, ask your question. So she's so right. Now he's probably like, oh my word, question. What do I ask? Right? What am I asking now? I'm waiting to see it. If you guys see it before me. Jason, lucky, right? Lucky. Let's see. Here we go. Oh, man. I already asked you and you put it up on the screen, so now I don't know what to say. Oh, come on. You won the question draw. We'll do it one more time. One more time. Here we go. Hated the fact that he was caught. Yeah, he did. Suzanne, it's you. You're up. Ask your question. I've never done a question draw before, but it's quite fun. Thank you, Jitterbug, for joining us. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Grizzly. I've asked my question 10 times. Okay, Amy, you have asked your question 10 times. You are right. Let's ask that one. I'm not too sure about it, but let's see. Okay, ask about the DNA companies letting people opt out of their DNA being used to solve crimes.
Right. Is that a question for me?
Yeah, that's a question for you. It's been asked a few times, meaning... let me find it in another version that was phrased differently there. Something about law enforcement not wanting people to submit it this way. Ask about the DNA companies letting people opt out of their DNA being used to solve crimes. Interesting. Any thoughts?
Is that what they're doing now? Can you check a box that says I don't want my DNA used?
Yeah, that's what it seems to be.
How it's doing.
There we go. Ask her if she knows DNA companies are now blocking law enforcement from using their companies to solve crimes.
I'm not aware of that.
Right.
But that doesn't mean it's not happening. But I will say law enforcement has ways around things sometimes.
Right. Goodness. Okay, you guys are all stage fright here. She answered it. Thanks. Okay, no problem. Well, that was fun anyway to see you guys win the question award. Didn't he call his victims afterwards to taunt, right, and cause more fear? He did.
That's a good question. I never verified that either. The many victims talk about that, and back then there were a lot of people that would make these prank calls. The kids would do that, so I was never able to verify it without asking him if he did that. But many victims were certain that it was him. What I will tell you is that that's not a behavior that I would rule out based on who he is. So it's not one of those things where I said, no, it couldn't be him because that's not who he is. He very well could have done those types of things. So that's probably something he did do, but we've never been able to verify that. And that would be something only he could answer at this point.
Yes. Goodness, they say, Lieutenant Pete, what's your question? Let's just try and see that. I can't find your question, Lieutenant Peter Pranzo. But anyway, we have gone overtime every time, very much overtime. So where can people find, again, your podcast or anything that you're working on? Just find more about you or interviews you've done?
So you can go to our website, which is www.truecrimeconsult.com. The Consult podcast is on, all the different services that you can, find the podcasts on. And then I'm on Twitter. I've at the Consult Pod. And I'm not really a prolific tweeter. I'm still getting used to it, but I put out information about the shows and things like that.
Yes, I found you on there. I'm on Twitter now, everyone too. We're both on Twitter. So here's the truecrimeconsult.com.
Yeah, and my colleagues are also there. So
yes,
you can see Bobsy and Susan and Angela. So we all work together, and they are embarking on this new journey with me.
Wow, that is so amazing. It sounds like a lot of fun as well.
It is a lot of fun. It's serious work. It's important work. But we all love doing it. We loved working together. We loved being in the unit. Yes. And we love sharing that information with people.
Yes. And here are the episodes. You can see Profiling Joe DeAngelo. Part 2 and 3 is on here, but part 1, 2, and 3 available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and everywhere else you listen to your podcast.
Yeah. And we're not always going to cover cases either. You see there we have profiling concepts. So some of our shows will be geared towards just teaching. So that episode, Profiling Concepts, I kid you not, is the first class you would take if you were becoming an FBI profiler. We all took it and we all taught it to new profilers. So it's all the concepts that we needed to know as profilers and to understand. And so we thought that, as our listeners are going through the cases with us, we want them to know, okay, when we say staging, this is what we mean and this is what we don't mean. Or if we're talking about a body that was dumped versus a body that was buried, they can go back to these shows and try to think about, okay, what does that mean? And they can start forming kind of their own ideas and opinions along with us. And I always say, we're not always going to agree with each other. Listeners may not agree with us, but that's what profiling is. And then coming up with the most likely scenario, observations, personality traits, and characteristic sequence of events that we can based on the information that we have. So there'll be a lot of covering cases, but it will also be some more instructional type of podcasts as well. And like I said, hopefully some younger people who are students that want to go into this type of work will really enjoy those episodes particularly.
Absolutely. And all the Grizzly geeks are there. They say, find a way for Julia to come back, please. Everyone's like, no. Guys, the goodbye is harder than ever tonight. You can see I'm stalling big time because this is just way too much fun. This is the most overtime we've ever had. I'm like, wait, we're not done yet. They also say free Spotify or pay. I think it's free on Spotify to listen to because I listened to it today.
It's free. It's free. Correct.
It's free. So go check it out. True Crime Consult. Exactly.
We're not doing it. We are not doing it to make money. We don't expect to. It's all free and will remain so unless somebody wants to give us a lot of money, then maybe it won't be.
Right? Big time sponsors. Absolutely. Sponsors or welcome. truecrimeconsult.com. So thank you everyone for joining us. I mean, we don't want to go. This is too much fun. I'm glad you're all begging for Julia to come back, because me too. We're going to go to the after party
Thank you.
StreamYard room, and I will do some begging, okay? We hope so. This has been so interesting. They say such an interesting guest. Thanks. And Julia, yes. And Lieutenant Peter Pronto, agree. Nod,
Thank
agree.
you.
Absolutely.
You might want to have one of my colleagues on as well. Oh, they're going to be really mad at me for
Yeah, they're like, what? Feeling FOMO, fear of missing out. What's going on there? One at a time. We'll give them each the spotlight here on the Grizzly True Crime Show. Absolutely. Everyone loved it. I'm so glad you guys loved it. If you did, remember to hit the thumbs up so that YouTube knows you loved it too. And so you can override any trigger words we said tonight, okay? Make sure you like it and comment to make sure that YouTube's like, wait a minute, this is an important episode. Yes, get it out there. Oh my word, I've never seen people beg for a return so much. Please return. And
thank you. That's really kind. Thank you.
I've never had that before. They say I'll have to watch the replay. Mikey's Mammy, I'm going to go to my second channel right now and do a summary of this. So if you want to just catch up in 5 minutes, what happened on the show, it's going to be over there. It's called Grizzly True Crime Highlights. It's on my About page, and the mods have put it here as well. They say, great night, Gisela, Julia, chat, friends. Right? Everyone's saying, we'd love to have Julia back. Okay, but give the colleagues a turn, right? We've got to have Bob on. We've got to have Susan on. We've got to have Angela on. Imagine all of you together as well. That could be fun.
Oh, yeah, that would be.
Oh, my word. I'd be very, very quiet, guys. I'd just be listening. It would be total expertise in the house. My goodness. Well, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I was going to say this evening. For me, it's evening. For you, it's afternoon. Kind of evening now, though, right? 6:30 for you. For me, it's 12:30.
Evening for me.
12:30, everyone. Florida time. Me in the Netherlands, Florida time. We're going to go now. Thank you for the overtime, for sticking with us. They say 10 stars. My goodness. 10 stars.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was so nice. And if you want to take those 10 stars over to Apple Podcasts on True Crime Consult podcast, that would be amazing. Thank you, everyone. I'll see you very soon for more content. Go and see me on the other side on the highlights channel for some highlights of tonight's interview soon. And hope to see Julia back. Thank you. Let me play my little outro here. Bye, everyone.